We are excited to welcome Justice Roger Page to the podcast. Justice Page has served on the Tennessee Supreme Court since 2016. His judicial career spans more than 25 years, serving as an appellate judge on the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals from 2011 to 2016. In 1998, he was elected Circuit Court Judge in the 26th Judicial District. He is a native of West Tennessee, born and raised in Chester County. I'm your host, Nick Morgan. Justice Page, welcome to Tennessee Court Talk.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We are catching you during a time of transition in your life at the moment as you prepare to retire from the bench August 31st. What's on the top of your mind right now?
Well, I'm thinking about what I'll be doing the next few years in retirement, especially the next few months. My wife, Chancellor Carol McCoy, and I plan to do some traveling. We have traveled quite a bit in the last few years, but we both want to go to Australia and New Zealand, and we're planning time to do that. We're also planning to go to Egypt. We had a trip to Egypt planned last year, but it didn't work out because of some turmoil in the Middle East. But I'm not going to just lie around and do nothing. I've got a couple of projects going back home. I'm renovating my mother's house. She passed away this past November. And also I'm building a barn dominium on the farm I grew up on, and it just really got started about 2 weeks ago. They're supposed to be doing the framing this week, so it's always interesting to watch a house being erected.
So certainly staying busy. You have one of the more unusual paths into the judiciary. Before your legal career, you worked as a chief pharmacist and assistant store manager for Walgreens. What caused you to make such a dramatic change in your career?
Well, I guess we can say it's interesting. I grew up in a farm family. My mother was one of 8. My dad was one of 7. And all my aunts and uncles, for the most part, were farmers. No one had gone to college until my generation. There are 18 grandchildren on my mom's side and 33 on my dad's side. So we were the first generation to go to college. We have dentists and nurse practitioners and lawyers and several educators, and I'm not sure there are any farmers at the next generation. I think we all had to pick cotton and hoe cotton and work in the truck patches and haul hay. And the only thing, when I was getting out of high school and going up to the University of Tennessee at Martin, the only thing I really knew was that I did not want to be a farmer. So one of my friends was going into pre-pharmacy there, and at that time, it was only a 5-year program, 2 years undergraduate, and then 3 years in pharmacy school at the University of Tennessee in Memphis. And I was lucky enough to get accepted to pharmacy school after 2 years. And during my fourth quarter there, it was 9 quarters straight through. I started in the fall of 75, and then I had a pharmacy law class. It was fascinating. It was taught by a pharmacist lawyer named Bruce White. And after sitting through 2 or 3 of his classes, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I went to the dean of the pharmacy school and told him I was going to drop out and go to law school, and he said, "Don't do that. You're half finished with this study. You can use that when you go to law school," because I actually used my BS in pharmacy as my undergrad degree to get into law school.
Interesting.
Both professions are wonderful professions. I enjoyed my time. I actually started to work at Walgreens in 77 as a student, and then went to law school in 81. At that time, the University of Memphis had a night program. And I was going to start into the night program when I realized that pharmacists with the small drugstores and even at Walgreens didn't want someone to come in and work days and go to school at night. They wanted you to go to school in the daytime and then come fill prescriptions at night. So that's what I did. I worked a lot as a pharmacist during law school. I had never clerked, never worked in any legal setting at all until Judge Julia Gibbons hired me as one of her law clerks in 1984.
How did your upbringing on a farm in Mifflin influence you as a judge, primarily as a trial judge, where you heard civil and criminal cases from your own community?
Well, of course, I knew, especially in Chester and Henderson County. I had 3 counties, Chester, Henderson, and Madison. Madison County is where I lived at that time. Chester County is where I grew up and went to high school. And then most of my cousins, aunts, and uncles lived in Henderson County. So I knew a lot of the litigants, not enough to recuse myself in most cases, because if you did that, you wouldn't try anything in those small counties. In answering your question, I was taught respect for everyone, to treat everyone fairly, and be honest with everyone, to be kind, and I tried to do that during my time as a judge. I mean, cases were not always easy. Your decisions were not always easy to make. But once you made one, I tried to explain why I was doing what I was doing. And, years later, I had people who'd gone to prison for 8, 10, 12 years come back and tell me, you did the right thing. I've learned my lesson. I'm leading a proper life now.
And that's really what it's all about, right?
That's correct.
After 25 years on the bench, is there a particular case that has stayed with you?
Well, I tried both civil and criminal cases. All cases are very important to the litigants involved in that case. I will say that most of the cases that I tried with publicity were, of course, criminal cases. I tried a lot of murder cases. I presided over capital cases. The ones that were hardest for me emotionally were the cases involving child victims. But as I said, all cases are very important. But there is one that stands out simply because it was so tragic. We had a locksmith murdered here in Jackson. I think it was 2009. And he was a former Marine, had no ties to West Tennessee. And he and his wife had just driven through here and thought that West Madison County was pretty country, and they bought a farm out there. And he had, I want to say, 7 children. And he was just minding his own business one morning, fixing a car for a young lady whose car had broken down when she was going to school. And there was a 15-year-old boy who shot him and killed him. And there was another man involved in it who was 24. That one really affected me, having to sit there and watch the victim's family suffer. And I also remember the young defendant's mother. She suffered a lot too, because she had tried to do what was right with him, and he had chosen to commit a crime like that.
What has challenged you the most on the bench during your time?
It gets easier as you go along, but I think work-life balance, you have to learn to put it aside. I mean, every time I had a case, I took it to heart, tried to do the best I could with it. I knew that I wouldn't always be right, but I could always show up on time and work hard and be prepared and do what I thought was right under the law on each case. It was hard for me, coming from a little county like Chester. I remember having cases in there, people I'd known growing up, mainly the parents of my high school friends, might come in the courtroom and sit and watch. And I always wondered, now, do they think by coming in here they're going to influence me one way or the other? I have a brother who's 8 years older, and my dad had made a basketball court out in the pasture. It was 84 feet long, 10 feet high. And he was maybe 14, 15. He and all his buddies would play basketball, and I was 5 or 6. And I would come out there and lie down on the court. They'd have to bring chewing gum and candy to get me out of the way so they could play ball. I had a good thing going until my mother saw what was happening out the window one day, and that ended my candy collecting days. But one of those fellas ended up being a banker in one of the surrounding counties, and I was on the bench the first year in Chester County, and I noticed him sitting in the courtroom. At the end of the morning, I asked him if he had business with the court, and he said, "No, sir. I heard about this. I just wanted to see it for myself."
Oh, he didn't believe you'd become a judge, the candy-eating kid. What would you like for people to know about the role of a judge or the judiciary in general?
Well, we are human like everyone else who has a job to do. But I will say that of all the lawyers that I've known in rural West Tennessee, 400 or 500 of them, there are only 1 or 2 that if you've told me I'm going to go to Joe Blow, I'd say don't do that. 99% plus lawyers are hardworking and honest. And the same thing with judges. Right now, it's a hard time in our history to be a judge because you make difficult decisions, and then the next thing you know, you're on social media being criticized and people calling you corrupt and things like that. And I've learned not to read those things. In fact, I've had some friends of mine send me copies of things on TikTok, and I'm like, unless somebody's threatening to kill me, I don't want to see these things.
Sure. There have been a lot of changes. You were speaking about TikTok. There have been a lot of changes to the practice of law and the court system over your career. What's the one that stands out to you the most?
Well, when I became a lawyer practicing in 1985, I'd be given an assignment by a partner, here's your subject. I want the cases on this. And I would go into the library, pull out the digests and the Shepherds and all those books and spend hours on that assignment and do the best I can. But I would always be thinking, did I miss something? Now you can go to Westlaw or Lexis, plug in your important words, and you know for sure you've gotten every case. So it's much easier to new research now than it was 40 years ago.
You served as Chief Justice from 2021 to 2023 of the Tennessee Supreme Court. You helped secure substantial funding to implement enterprise e-filing for the court system. Seems like a practical step forward, but these kinds of big changes are challenging. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it's something that we knew we needed to do. So we were able to get the legislature to appropriate a large sum of money for us to go into some of the smaller counties and the clerk's offices, and that was the biggest impediment. Most of the smaller counties just couldn't afford to implement a system like this. And, of course, we're still working on it, but it's like a lot of other things, just like technology overall. Some people resist it, but then once they start using it, they realize how much easier it is. And it won't be this year or next year, but at some point we're going to have a unified court system, I think, when everybody can figure out what's going on in Sumner County or just like in Shelby County and Davidson County.
You've also been a big proponent of access to justice and pro bono service, encouraging greater transparency and efficiency in the judiciary with live streaming of appellate oral arguments.
Number one, pro bono work is very important for every attorney to take on a good amount for his or her practice. And we don't have true justice till it's for everybody, and monetary impediments shouldn't keep people from having a good lawyer. So I always encouraged everyone to, we always do the Attorneys for Justice, 50 hours of pro bono work. That should be the beginning point for everybody. Same thing with, the first cases I tried to a jury were all appointed criminal cases. I started in Jackson in 87 before we had a statewide public defender's office. In 89, so I'd be in my office and somebody would show up with his or her indictment and say, "Hey, you're my lawyer. Judge Merkus just sent me over here to see you." As far as live streaming, to me, that is the best innovation I've seen during my whole career, because anybody can sit and look at the appellate courts, all three of them in our state, Court of Criminal Appeals, Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court, and see how well prepared the lawyers are, how well prepared the justices and judges are.
It sounds like you're going to start a new career as a carpenter, but if you don't end up starting yet another career, what are your plans after you retire from the judiciary?
Well, I want to spend more time with my wife, more time with my grandchildren. My wife and I have 4 boys, and then the first 2 grandchildren were boys, so I didn't think I would ever see a female offspring. Now we have a 9-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 7-month-old granddaughter. And I have to say, if I had to do over, I'd make sure I had some girls, because those are the people who take care of you when you're old and can't help yourself. I do have a little sister, younger sister, who's 11 years younger than I am, and my brother's 8 years older. So when I was in the 6th grade, my sister was born. I was embarrassed, but my dad was always working, mother was always working, so I took care of my sister. And on her last birthday, I wrote her a note, and she's got somewhere, because she's not throwing it away, that says, "One of my remaining goals in life is to live long enough you have to change my diaper."
How do you want to be remembered as a judge?
Just that I showed up on time, worked hard, and did the very best I could to follow the law and do what was right in each case.
What would people be surprised to know about you?
Well, I can talk a while about this one. Growing up in rural West Tennessee in the 60s, my older brother and all his friends and everybody I knew were Cardinals fans. And I'm just I always want to be a little bit different. So the first year I was old enough to really watch baseball was the summer of 62. I was 6 years old. And the Giants had Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Juan Marichal, Jim Davenport, Jim Ray Hunter, Gaylord Perry, all these great players. And it's ancient history for most people. What's that been, 62 years ago? But the Giants and Dodgers fought all season to be in first place. And at the end of the year, they were tied. So they had a 3-game playoff. And the Giants beat the Dodgers 2 out of 3, and then went to the World Series with the Yankees. And that was also very equally contested. They went to the seventh game. And the Yankees managed to get a run when Tony Kubek hit into a double play with a guy on third. So the Yankees were up 1-0 in the 9th inning. And Matty Alou bunted, got a base hit. Next 2 guys made outs. And then Willie Mays hit a double. So now you have runners from second, third, 2 outs, and Giants behind 1-0. And Willie McCovey hit a screaming line drive that would have won the game, except Bobby Richardson caught it, ended the game. So that was a night, and the Giants had won a pennant in 54. I was born in 55, so I was thinking, I'm going to live my whole life and never see my team win a World Series. And then Buster Posey came along, and the Giants won in 2010, 2012, and 2014. The only thing about being a Giants fan, because I've got the MLB network so I can watch them, but nobody told me that my team was 2,000 miles from home and I had to stay up to 1 o'clock in the morning to watch the end of the games. But in 2015, after my son Ethan finished the bar exam, we went to San Francisco to an old-timers game. And some of the people got to go down, in the locker room and all that kind of stuff. But Willie Mays was supposed to be there, and he didn't come. But we got to see McCovey and Marichal, and I think Gaylord Perry was there. But one of my regrets in life, Willie Mays died last week. I never got to meet him, have a picture made with him. First time after they put his statue outside the new stadium, which is not new anymore, I think it's opened in 2000. But one of the few times I've cried is when I went up to stood beside Willie Mays' statue and got a picture made.
For those of you listening, we are recording this in June before Justice Page retires in August. And Willie Mays just passed away last week. Do you have any other memories as a Giants fan, or was that your first time going out to San Francisco with your son?
No, I've been there. I used to go every summer. I've probably been out there 10 times. But one of my goals is to see a game in every stadium, and I've probably seen maybe 20. But my problem is, like you go and you see a game at the stadium, then they build a new one. You have to go back again. But I've been to most major league ballparks. But you asked me about things people will be surprised about me. I did another one of these a few weeks ago, and I told people I'm probably the only guy in the state who can fill a prescription, ride a motorcycle, argue a case or try a lawsuit, and
probably true,
and run a chainsaw. My dad and uncle had a little sawmill operation during the summer. Yesterday I was outside, and it was 95 degrees, and I was thinking, end of June, 50 years ago I would have been hoeing cotton. So I'm just so glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Justice Page, it's been a pleasure. I've known you for several years now. Thank you for your time on Tennessee Court Talk and your service to our state. We wish you the best in retirement.